Okay. Hi, everyone. So this week we're going to be doing the 12th demo on three-dimensional analysis and visualization. I've gone ahead and created the program file or project file and everything so far. Let me just get everything we need to see uploaded here. So we're going to be just working with some sample data. If you look in the folder, you should see on what I provided on Canvas. We have drainage paths, spot elevations, a castle that I built, a couple of DEMs and Landsats, some soils, just general sort of things that we would have worked with so far. Like I said, I've gone ahead and already created the project file over here. So what we're seeing is just the blank map right here. If you had started it from new, you would want to start with either a global scene or a local scene because that's what we're going to be working with. If you have not, if you're following along with and you've already created your project file, it's no problem to get there. We're just going to look at it in here. And then, sorry if my drop down will actually come through here. I've apparently broken it. Down in the drop down here, we have global scene and local scene. So what these are, if you remember from the other sorts of material, is the global scene is going to be things that the curvature of the Earth is important, continental level stuff, things that you might want to look at, routes across the whole world, that sort of thing. Local scenes are going to be for more regional areas and things like that. Navigation tools are similar in both of them, although they are a little bit different than the two-dimensional ones. Let's go ahead and just start up a local scene just to sort of see what that looks like. You could do both. They'll just come up as new tabs on the top here. So when we're talking about these scenes, it's already using a 3D renderer in here. If you're on your own personal computer, it may work faster or slower depending on the graphics card you have. It's not particularly resource intensive, but if you really get into high-end stuff, like a GPU or a higher-end processing machine might be a little bit easier to work with. So you see what we have to start off with is the navigation tools down in the corner are a little bit different. Our zoom tools are the same, but they feel a little different. The center mouse button now tilts us if we click that down instead of panning us. So we're actually changing the angle that we're viewing. And you can start to kind of zoom in on things. And it'll render the base maps in there, but they're not, they don't have quite the same level of detail that they would have in the 2D version. Though they will eventually load up and be okay. So if we're moving around in which is the left mouse button in 2D, we're kind of doing it that way. If we always wanted to go back to north, we can just click that button. It'll turn us back that way. We have a couple of other things down here as well. There's that planar navigation. That's what I was just basically doing, where I'm kind of dragging myself around, but I can actually go up and down a little bit as well. There is this full controls, which will let us see just a little bit more. In this case, there's not too much more. It just makes it bigger. And then there's this ability to do first-person navigation also. What we would do with that was just sort of clicking, and you're basically either identifying what's there or allowing yourself to kind of like move around as if you were doing something. We'll get to that a little bit later on, but first I'm going to go back to just the planar view here. If you are in your map view, you have a lot of the same sorts of tools that we've seen before. We can jump to particular spots. We can have bookmarks stored in there. All of our other sorts of things. Our full extent, the icon is a little bit different because it zooms us all the way out to a two-dimensional view like that. There's no layers in here, so that's why it's all the way out. Why don't we go ahead and add some layers in, though? That might be useful at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a different base map. We haven't done this too much yet, but there's a base map button here. I've got the topographic one on. Personally, I find the imagery ones to be a little bit easier to work with, like just more intuitive in 3D because it doesn't look like a topo map quite the same way. But you can do kind of whatever you want. In most cases, as I said before, it doesn't really matter where we go because the world is pretty flat while we're viewing things. And oops, I managed to zoom myself way back out. I'm just going to go all the way in. I'll figure it out in a second. Because what's actually going to be more useful to start off with is adding a new layer in so we have something to jump to in here. So I'm going to go into my add data. You could also do the catalog anywhere you want to. I have put this stuff in the folder. I'm going to start off with, why don't we just start off with the soils from Notre Dame, because we have some sort of layer in there. It'll bring us there. It's going to take it a second to render, just because of the 3D nature of it. You can see down here that it's still drawing. Like I said, this does take just more time because we're dealing with things in 3D. It takes a little bit longer to render it. Expect that might happen. For some reason, my soils are not showing up as anything different here. It probably is a symbology issue. What I might want to do is just click on the symbology, change it. I'm going back in here and changing it to be unique values, and then off of the soil code. And you can see that eventually it'll take it a second and it'll render this in the 3D viewer for us. It is by default bringing it in on top of the base map layer. That is what we want here. I talked a lot about base heights and things like that. What I didn't distinctly mention in the demo is that the 3D viewer in ArcGIS Pro automatically brings it in at the height that it thinks that the world is. It's not a particularly high resolution DEM. It's not going to match everything, but it's going to sit on top of those imagery layers and things like that. So other things that we might want to be able to bring in, I'm going to turn off the soils there. I'll just show you some of these other ones. If we brought in that DEM that was in there, so the DEM.tiff, it'll, again, you can see it working down here. It just takes a minute to get it all in. And I'm trying, perhaps slowly to minimize my soils over here. Okay, so my DEM is in. You can see it floating right there. You can see how it matches up with stuff. We could change the symbology over so that we have, instead of that black to white, we have one of the elevation color ramps. Again, I like to show names so I can see what's going on. And then I can go down to elevation 1. Just takes it a minute to render everything. And then you can start doing that kind of 3-dimensional zooming in on things. A couple of things to know. If we go in here to the properties, I just double clicked, you could right click as well. There are some things that could possibly show us sort of where the layer is. We do have some display stuff. We could make it more transparent. We could say that the elevation of the features is on the ground or on a custom elevation surface. This is a DEM. It has elevation, so it is, you could easily, instead of using what they say, you could say right here, and then the custom surface is itself. You could offset it. You could do all sorts of things like that. You can see now that you have this elevation surfaces, ground, and DEM. Like I said, ground is for the whole world. It may or may not be super accurate. In fact, you can see where it doesn't exactly match perfectly with what we have in our DEM. You can always just turn off that ground layer. Now you're actually looking at the DEM the way you created it. And you can see how staggeringly topographically variable northern Indiana is. But one thing you can also do, I'm just going to turn off the imagery layer as well, just so it's not constantly trying to render it behind the scenes there. Okay, so having brought in these additional layers and things like that, we do have the ability to do that vertical exaggeration to sort of take over that everything's flat thing. It's down in these elevation surface areas. If we choose one of these as the layer itself, you can see that we now get this elevation surface layer tab up here. We can set a vertical exaggeration here of, maybe 25. And what you'll see is we lose where things were because all the elevations got multiplied by 5. But now we're actually seeing something that looks a little bit more like topographic relief. This reference layer that's just sitting down back at the ground. So we can turn that off. We'll start to see things that look a little bit better. If I do that plane view, I can zoom up on here and actually begin to kind of rotate myself around my spot. Once you have your sort of custom layer in also, this is where you could take that, say, soils layer that I showed before. If we go into the properties for it, see it's all the way back down at the surface now. If we go back into the properties for it, we can set its base heights on elevation here to be above the thing. So we're going to float it on top of the DEM. And now we have that vertically exaggerated version that should pop up sitting on top there. And it actually isn't having problems with the clipping planes or anything. It looks like it's rendering it really, really well. So that works out pretty well as a way to do that. Other things that we brought in before that I just want to show a couple of these things. I'm going to go back and add in just a couple of the other ones. We'll do the spot elevations and the castle. I'm going to bring in drainage paths too, just so you can see what those look like. Okay, so having brought these in, there's a couple things we need to do. First of all, you'll see that there's 2D layers and 3D layers in here. To make this an actual 3D layer, we just have to take something like drainage paths and bring it up to the 3D layers. That's all you really need. From there, we can go into the elevation part here. And we have a lot more options than we would otherwise. So we could do an absolute height relative to the ground, custom elevation surface relative to custom elevation surface. So in this case, we're going to do an absolute height. And we're going to use the field. Oh, I brought in the drainage paths. I moved the wrong one up. Sorry. So we're going to move up the elevations to start with. Move that up there. Go back in to the properties. Features are at an absolute height. And that height is the elevation. And when I hit OK, they have moved themselves up to that height. Mind you, they are points that are floating around probably down at the surface. And they're going to be a little bit hard to see. I'm going to turn off the drainage paths as well. So there they are. They're floating in the right spot. They're just down at the very base of the surface. So we have them there. We could show them as a different type of symbology if we wanted to. One of these funky, funky 3D viewer things if we wanted. And as you zoom in on them, even if they're way down at the bottom there, you can see them in there. Oh, I'll just come back out through my soils. Sometimes it's then useful to just be able to go and zoom back to your layer, which is going to show me kind of roughly where I am. We also talked about base heights and extrusions. So I do want to just show for these drainage paths, I could put my features up on my exaggerated piece up there. So I could have them on a custom elevation surface, the Notre Dame DEM. That's great. That's what I want. If I wanted to then extrude them, I could go to its layer type. So, oh, I didn't actually turn them on. So remember, the extrusion is just going to turn them in, so it's still rendering down here. Turn off some of this other stuff. What's happening is it's dropping, when it drops off the edge, it goes back down to the other layer that it can find, which is why there's these like waterfall looking things. We could turn those off if we wanted to put a clipping mask or something on. It's not the end of the world to do it. I'm just turning them to something that I can see a little bit more clearly. All right, we also talked before about extruding things or making them so that they become walls instead of lines, or towers instead of points, or you can do them off of other stuff as well. So to do this, I'm going to first do it with just the drainage paths. I've brought them up to the layer here into 3D. When we have them selected, if we come over to the feature layer, there's this type right here, and we would choose base height. If you wanted to, so there's a bunch of different types in here. You can bring them up lots of different ways. If we wanted to bring them up to base height, what we're actually looking to do is you could go off of a field that's in there. If you don't, you can do right here. And I've just switched this over from being arcade to VB basic. You can do it either way if you're comfortable with them. And I'm just going to make it 10 meters high. So I just put an expression of 10. So now they're sitting on top of the base layer here. It's just rendering. You can see again down here. And now they've become kind of walls, which makes them a little bit easier to see. So you can see how they're shaded and things like that in there too. Kind of a neat way to do that. The other way to do it with these is if you bring up the castle here. If you remember, I talked about this before, that I made this one part of your assignment. If you choose to do it for this one is to do the same thing. Just rendering. But what we want to be able to do is take that castle that has a series of polygons with a bunch of different heights in it. So you see it's got heights in there. We want to bring those up. First, have it sit on the layer itself that we're using. So if I went back into here and went to elevation, I could have it sitting on top of my DEM, which is the one with the exaggeration. And then if I zoom to it, hopefully that will render in a moment. And you'll see what's going on there. Why it's not rendering. There it is. So that's the castle that I had built reasonably quickly. The surface should be, it's down, it's all the way down at the ground or something right now, probably. Oops. Hitting everything all at once. Just trying to go to zoom to layer again, just so we're sure we have it. This refresh button sometimes will help with bringing stuff in. I think it's just still bringing in all the other layers. But it's the same way before. So we've already set its height where we want it to be. We're going to come in, choose it, go to the feature layer, type. We're going to extrude up like this. Our field is going to be height. And then we should end up with a situation where we have our castle. So I'm just having a little bit of trouble getting it navigated in. Is now extruded up as if it was buildings, because the heights are all different. Some of them, you see I left them at zeros. Some of them are the same height. Some of them are up a little higher. This was supposed to basically be the library with a tower and things around it. I could, in here, when I'm setting my height, if I want to make it extra high, I could do times 5. Should make it higher, but for some reason it's broke everything there. Presumably that's not how you do that in Arcade, but yeah. We did it. I know that's a VB script would work just fine. These are just two different languages for doing this stuff, and I know one of them better than the other. So there we go. Oh, it had worked before too. It just takes it a second to render. It's just making it much, much taller. Okay, so we have our extrusions. We can bring things up. We can vertically exaggerate. We can do all sorts of other stuff. If we wanted to share these things when we get into demo or to the things later on where we're working with exporting imagery, they're all kind of in the same spot in Pro other than creating final things. We can go to share here and you can just export it or capture the clipboard. That's going to give you just the view instead of all the other stuff. So it's sort of like print screen, but it doesn't give you all the stuff around the outside, which is why I don't have you use it until later on. There is a part of the assignment where you would export a couple of cool views of your castle or whatever else you do in 3D. However, the one that's probably a little bit more fun to do are these animations, these 3D animations. And they're a little complicated, but they do work really pretty successfully. We're going to go back to the View tab, and we're going to do Add over here where it says Add Animation. Should bring up a thing at the bottom here about keyframes and stuff like that. We don't have quite the same like just record an animation that we had before. You can do it in some ways by following paths and things like that. But one relatively easy way to do it is just to do these keyframes where we're gonna first start like way out, create a keyframe, and then we're gonna zoom in a little bit, create a keyframe, And we're going to kind of rotate ourselves around a little bit. Maybe even move in the middle. See what that looks like. Oh, back to the wrong viewer there. Just create kind of these general things that you want to see as you're sort of leaving. And then I'm just going to zoom my way back out and say goodbye. Okay. Then you can try playing it back to see what it looks like. It does the kind of smoothness between them all. It's not going to be super jumpy or jerky or anything like that. It actually does a pretty good job of pulling them all in for you. And then you have this nice video at the end that you can go ahead and export out to. Just letting it finish this sort of rendering thing. Okay, so from the sort of ribbon on the top animation here, to get them exported, you're going to choose where it says movie. Might be down here. No, so you could put, sorry, I didn't say this before, you could put titles and all sorts of other things. This is export movie thing right here. You could do, there's presets and things like that here. It doesn't really matter which one you use for the moment. They all kind of work for me to view. You could just leave it on YouTube. Hit wherever you want to send it. Go ahead and hit export. And you can see that it's actually going to export the animation sort of slowly here. So this will go from 0, looks like how many frames it is in it, 0 to 999. Mine seems to be going extra slowly. Once that'll get all done, you should be good to go with it and be able to view it sort of as you want. There might be run into some cases where the codecs for that particular video type are not on that computer or something like that. It's okay if that happens. We can work it out. Yeah, mine is currently saying that it's going to take about 40 minutes to finish. So I'm not going to keep the video running the whole time for that. It also probably will not take that amount of time. It'll get going faster. If you need to do it at any point faster, you can always drop it into one of these other presets. My guess is that the YouTube one is actually just one of the higher ones. So you could probably try Instagram and see what that does. Probably makes it a lot smaller, that sort of thing. So feel free to experiment around with those, but I would not sit and wait for 52 minutes for it to finish exporting a video for a small assignment as part of the last big demo of your GIS class.